Today we're going to talk about square roots. Now, before we even talk about square roots, we're going to go to a little bit of basics where we already know, some things we already know. This is 4 to the second power, or we would say 4 squared. We could represent this as saying 4 times 4, or we could evaluate it and say that it is also equal to 16. Right? We already know this, 4 to the second power, we call it 4 squared. Coincidentally, square roots are going to have a little something in common with that square. If we go to that 16 and we say 16, we put a little radical sign over it. That is going to be, it's essentially going to ask us what number times itself would give us 16. That's what this little radical is saying here. We're saying what is the square root of 16? What squared would be 16? We know that it would be 4. Okay, now something I want to point out here. We're going to go through some examples, and the more examples we go through, that'll help you kind of get used to these, the square roots. The square root of 16 would be 4. In the same case, what number times itself would give us 9? What times itself gives us 9? Well, we know that would be 3. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 16 is 4. So let's go through a couple more examples. That'll help drive this home. So, okay, the square root of 25, that's pretty easy. What times itself would give us 25? That's just going to be 5. It's something that you guys probably know when you learn your multiplication tables, we're just thinking them backwards. You learn that 5 times 5 is 25. Well, the square root of 25 is 5. We're just working those multiplication tables backwards. This one, you didn't learn a multiplication table for 4/9. But we can rewrite this to make this a little bit more friendly. This whole thing, 4/9, is underneath that radical. Well, we can rewrite this as the square root of 4 divided by the square root of 9. What's the square root of 4? Well, we know that 2 times 2 is 4. What's the square root of 9? Well, 3 times 3 is 9. Again, if you took 2/3 and times 2/3, you'd end up with 4/9. So when you have something like this, a fraction, you can break it down and find the square root of the denominator and the numerator separately. It's a little bit easier than trying to tackle this all in one go, right? Here's something we haven't seen. There's a little 3 here. Now, all of these ones we're talking about square roots. Just like when we have a power and there's no power here, we know that it's 1. When we have this little radical and there's no number in there, we know it's 2, the square root. In this case, when there's a 3 here, we're looking for the cube root. What number times itself 3 times gives us 8? Well, 2 times 2 times 2 would be 8. But since we're looking for the square root, we're not looking for 3 2's. So we know that 2 times 2 would give us 8. 2 times 2 times 2 would give us 8. But we're looking for the square root, just the single one. Our answer would just be 2. The cubed root of 8 is 2. What times itself 3 times? Again, we have a 3 up here. What times itself 3 times would give us 8? 2 times 2 times 2 would give us 8. So the cube root of 8 is just 2. So now we have one more example here that's a little bit different. We have plus or minus the square root of 144. Now, if you're pretty good with your multiplication tables, you would know the square root of this off the top of your head. You might also know this from buying things, whether it's bottle rockets, that's why I would know. 144 is called a gross. What it is 12 packs of 12. And also the square root of 144 is 12. 12 times 12 will give you 144. Now you see this plus or minus out here. That's going to be saying that this could be plus or minus 12. So let's talk about that a little bit. Plus or minus 12. If I take 12 times 12, it's going to give me 144, right? Well, what if I took negative 12 times negative 12? What happens when you multiply two negatives? You get a positive. Now this problem is saying plus or minus, which you might have in your book. But realistically, let's go back. the square root of 25, we're going to say is 5. But it could also actually be negative 5. Your book is just probably going to be looking for 5 to make it a little bit easier to get started with these. When they're looking for the plus or minus, they're going to put it out there. But negative 5 times negative 5 would actually give you 25. So the square root of 25 could be negative 5 as well, but the book's not looking for that answer in this case. They're just going to look for 5. When they want you to, they're kind of introducing these plus or minuses not to confuse you, but to take you one step further to realizing that positive 12 times positive 12 could be 144, or negative 12 times negative 12. Now it's not one of each, because positive 12 times negative 12 would give you negative 144. And that's not a square root. It's not the same thing. They're two different things. So that's all these plus or minuses. You're just going to have an answer that's going to come out like this, plus or minus 12. And that's the basics for getting started with square roots.